Sometimes when I'm talking with Mormons, they just are convinced that everything that I'm reading about Mormonism, or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, must be anti-Mormon material.
They're haters.
Exactly.
But honestly, that's really just not the case. In fact, I would just say that in order to show that Mormonism isn't something most people would want to be true, or isn't true in itself, I don't think I have to go any further than reading your own material.
Oh, that's cold.
So let's talk about it. So I would generally think that when you're writing a history of your own church or your own religion and how it got started, or as they would say, as LDS, the church became restored, that I should read that book and come to the end of it convinced, or at the very least, wanting that church to be true, wanting to join on board with that church.
I want in on this.
But I would say that my experience, as I've been reading through this series that the Mormon Church has put together, this Saint series, this is one of 3 books, I've had the very opposite effect. In essence, as I read this through, I become more and more convinced that this is the last thing I would ever want to be true. And it seems to be showing me that it is in fact not true. So I don't think I have to look any further than your own material to become, well, I guess you would say anti-Mormon.
Why do you hate me?
But that's only because I'm trying to follow what is true and what is good. And when I read this, it doesn't seem true or good.
Man, that's just me.
In the 3rd volume, on page 100, it gives an example of Reed, who has been elected to a position of Congress in the U.S. Senate. And there's some people that are fighting against him. And it mentions this, that the members who were most against Reed's critics were members of the Salt Lake Ministerial Association, a group of Protestant businessmen, lawyers, and clergymen from Utah. Shortly after the election, they formally petitioned the Senate to deny Reed his seat. Their petition claimed that the First Presidency and the Quorum of 12 Apostles wield supreme political and economic authority over the saints and demanded absolute obedience from them. They also asserted that church leaders still preached, practiced, and supported plural marriage despite the manifesto. Now, to give a little background, Reed has been elected to a position of the Senate, and there's some of these people that are against the LDS Church, and part of it is because of their support in the past for polygamy. Now, the church at this time has put out a manifesto saying that we're against polygamy, and therefore it doesn't seem like it has much grounding to say that the LDS are still supporting polygamy. But you have this group of Protestant ministers who are saying he shouldn't be in this position because ultimately the leaders of the LDS Church have complete control over him, that they are actually still promoting polygamy and also would be able to tell him exactly how he should run everything that he does as a Senate leader. And frankly, as much as the book wants to give the impression that these claims are unfounded, the book also makes it very clear that these claims are extremely well founded. Let's look at it. Page 103, you see that Reed had warned him, this is the current president at the time, though the senators would ask about every aspect of his home life and demand details about his plural marriages. In other words, the current president was still practicing polygamy. Of course, then those senators actually asked for more information, and when they talked with the president, he said this: "That is contrary to the rule of the church, and contrary as well to the law of the land." But he spoke openly about his refusal to abandon his plural family. "I have cohabitated with my wives," he said, "and they have borne me children since 1890. Now, just to be clear, the Edmunds Act, which made polygamy illegal, was actually passed in 1882. So if his family was pursuing plural marriages in 1890, they were breaking that law.
Oh, I see.
Page 107 also tells us that he was still living with his 5 wives. Now granted, according to this, the president at the time did say that if anybody did perform plural marriages after the manifesto was passed, that those people would be liable to church discipline and maybe even kicked out of the church. But factually, they just didn't do this. It was a way of pushing the Senate away and making them comfortable with what was going on. The book, in other parts, tells us about three men: John W. Taylor, Matthias Crowley, and Joseph Tanner, who all engaged in helping make new plural marriages after the Manifesto. Those people were given some church discipline in the sense that they were then removed from their places of being part of the quorum or part of the 12, but they were still considered part of the church. In fact, both John and Matthias were still called apostles. You can find that information on page 116. That's not exactly coming down hard on church discipline when you're just removing them from being part of the 12, yet they're still apostles, which I don't really know how that works within LDS theology, because the whole idea is that there is only 12 apostles, or 70 within the quorum, and there would be more if these people aren't actually removed from their apostleship role, which is what that is defined as.
I don't get it.
As far as the other claim regarding them asking for money or requiring those who are in the Senate and are LDS to follow their lead regarding money, you can look at page 77. On page 77, it reads this: "Before the closing of the meeting, the prophet called on everyone to stand up, raise their right hands, and pledge to keep the law of tithing as the word of the Lord. We want you to be diligent in obeying this law," he told the saints, "and see that the word is conveyed to all the parts of the church." In other words, yes, they were saying that you needed to obey exactly as we say regarding your money.
Now raise your right hand for the pledge.
Earlier in the book, starting on page 41, B.H. Roberts decided to run for a position within the Utah government as a Democrat. Now, the president at the time of the church said that making a public declaration saying that those who are in positions of the church should dedicate themselves fully to church work and not positions of politics, despite the fact that earlier Joseph Smith himself ran for the election of the President of the United States. Later, that same current president of the LDS Church would tell B.H. Lawrence that he needed to either recant that he ever tried to run for a position within the government without the church's permission, or be kicked out of the quorum. On page 45, you read, "If he remained unrepentant, they would release him from the 70 and prohibit him from using the priesthood." All of that to say that if this book is trying to make the claim that these Protestants who were worried about the position of Reed become a senator because of the power that the church would have over him, they were absolutely right to have those concerns.
I agree with you there.